بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين والطاهرين ورضي عن أصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي واجعلي وزيرا من أهلي هارون أخي أشدد به أزري أما بعد ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I appreciate your patience. Inshallah, here's how we will start. We will, inshallah, begin with a small guided meditation, which we intend to go for no more than 10 minutes. But the experience of the guided meditation will introduce us experientially to the topics at hand. Inshallah, we'll try to do this. So everyone, just try to be comfortable. Including Hadi as well. Please be comfortable. And just try to sit and relax, inshallah, and just be present for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bismillah. So with each in-breath, very simply straighten your spine a bit, just a little bit. And with each out-breath, relax your shoulders and your chin, just a little. Bismillah. Take a deep breath and hold it to a count of 4. And now let go. And now hold it at the bottom of the out breath. 1, 2, 3. Now in breath, the 4 count. And hold it. 1, 2. Out breath. 1, 2. And hold at the bottom. In breath again, and continue this 4 count of the in breath, holding, out breath, holding. Bismillah. As you continue your awareness of your breath, bring some of your attention with your eyes shut to the sensations of the front of the room, or that which is in front of you, of the space that's in front of you. When you're comfortable with that space, that you're present for it, come to the interface, or where that space meets the very borders of the front of your body. Stay there for a moment. Observe that. Simply sense it. Bismillah. In your sensing, simply notice how it feels. That interface of the space in front of you as it touches the borders of your body. Bismillah. Try to feel into it until you sense that there is just simply the sensing of that experience. In other words, that there's no distinction between the space outside and that which it is touching. Try to feel into this experience. Observe it. And now bring some attention or awareness to your experience of the space that is behind your body, the full breadth of it. Notice that space with your eyes shut. Observe that space inwardly, energetically, in a sensing sense. Take a moment to do this as part of your attention is still on your breath. And now feel that interface of the bordering of that space with your body, where they meet, where they touch. Stay there for a moment with each and every breath. Bismillah. Simply notice any sensations that arise. Be fully present for them. Do not resist them or read them. Simply be present for them. Engage them, but without any evaluation or judgment. Simply observe them. And now bring your attention or your focus to the crown of your head, as if you're following the trajectory of your border that was touching the back and the front and bringing it as if to the top, to the crown of the head. Feel the bordering of the space that is on top and around, and as it meets the crown of your head. Stay there for a moment. Observe this, be aware of it as you still use the support of the breath. Simply notice how this feels. Again, with your eyes still shut. And now relax that focus a little bit and allow your awareness, that attention that was there, your observing that was there, to sink in a little bit to what you could call the center or the heart of your being. Just relax your focus back to the heart of your being, that is your awareness. Just relax it with each breath. And even more so on the out breath. Just relax it. This part of the exercise should not be difficult. Do not make it hard. We were focused on a point. Relax the focus and allow it to rest from where the attention comes from your presence of awareness. Relax it back into that with each and every breath. Notice how this feels. Feel free to use the sensing of your chest in your center as you continue relaxing this focus back to the focus of the attention, back to the source of awareness. Feel free to sense this center around your chest, the middle of your body, as you breathe in and out with the intention, with the contemplative intention of simply relaxing that focus back into the space of awareness, of aware presence. Bismillah. Notice how the relaxed sense of your being feels. And now, as you continue to relax in and as your center, imagine that you are relaxing your presence or your awareness and simply opening it to all of that which you are experiencing as the space around you, beyond the borders of your body with the space, simply everything around you where you are. Simply open the heart of your awareness and welcome any and all sensations, any and all thoughts, any and all feelings that arise, any at all sounds, anything that comes from what may be perceived as outside of you, and anything that arises from that which may be perceived as inside of you. Welcome it all, stay open entirely to this experience. Bismillah. Attempt to feel this openness. Simply notice how your physical sensations, your thoughts, even your feelings, even any object of perception from outside of you and inside of you, the subtle objects of perception, they come and they go. But that which is open in you, your heart of awareness, remains. This is your presence, even your spiritual presence. Take a moment to feel into this and relax into this with each and every breath. And remember to stay open as you relax into simply noticing this. There should be no constriction or concentration here. Feel into the center that is everywhere in your experience. In this sensing of the fullness of your presence, notice by your iman, by your faith, by the seeing of the eye of your faith, that Allah is already present here. Notice that Allah already encompasses the vastness of your openness as rahmah, as mercy, as al-wasi', as the vast, as al-muhit, as the all-encompassing, as ar-Rahman, as the infinitely gracious being that Allah is, that He always is. Relax and surrender to the embrace of the real, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Feel free to use the support of the breath as you surrender to the all-encompassing presence of the divine. Bismillah. Embrace that presence with all that you are, with all of the openness that you are, understanding that Allah encompasses that entirely. Bismillah. In this openness, there's no room to close. And in this all embracing presence of the divine, somehow there's no room for you. There is only the divine. Only Allah's presence of mercy. Only Allah's presence of nearness. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَ مَا كُنْتُمْ. And He is with you wherever you may be. And your sense of His witness in everything implies your absence as His witness. Bear witness to this witness and say with me, Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah. وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله. Now, with these states of muhasabah, muraqaba, and mushahadah that you have been invited to, ask Allah to allow you to stay in muraqaba as we continue the remainder of this session. Al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين يا رب العالمين. All right, alhamdulillah. So congratulations. You all cycled from the muhasabah of the sensing of your body and the space around you to a muraqabah of sensing your own presence with Allah, and to a mushahadah of La ilaha illallah, which is the shahada. So we just cycled. We went from aql, where we were observing ourselves, where we awakened aql or intellect. We were observing our nafs and the world around us, the dunya around us, from a place of awakened observation as aql. And we sunk the aql into an awakening of the heart, the qalb, in muraqabah with Allah, with the permission and the key of our iman, our faith. And then we were absorbed in the witness of Allah as ruh or sir. And we recited, we took the shahada existentially in that place. So you cycled through these latifas, these subtle centers of the human soul in one exercise. It is possible that you did not, perhaps, feel fully open to one of these centers or the most subtle of them. But notice that the more subtle a center became, it was more encompassing of your being and of everything that you experienced. It's not just a point inside. When you reach a point, it's a whole new world that encompasses you. It's an opening, it's an awakening. And so I pray that that was helpful in some way, inshallah. And I invite you to reflect on that experience as a means of awakening you to an insight. In the spiritual life, there's a famous statement that the spiritual organs come alive as you use them. They function as you use them, and so they awaken. And so this is really the case for the latifas, for the subtle centers, for the subtleties of the human consciousness that we have already hinted at. So with this said, let me reread the statement that the citation that I used last night that I think is very apt. I'd like to come back to this in the context of our topic for today, that is awakening the three centers, which we have alluded to already in some way, shape, or form, and we'll make that our didactic starting point. But although our starting point was already the experience that we had, the knowledge by direct experience, the dhok or the tasting that we had, all right, ultimately ma'rifah of the matter. So Al-Gawth Abu Madian, one of the major poles of Western or Maghribi Sufism, who is the murid of Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani for the West, or is a pole that comes after Al-Gawth al-Azam Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. You have Abu Madian, and then, as I mentioned, then he transmits to Ibn Mashish, and then who transmits to Sidi Abul Hasan al-Shadili, Sidi Imam Abul Hasan al-Shadili, Qaddasallahu sir. So in his hikam, he also has a hikam of aphorisms. But the most famous one is the hikam of Ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari. That's used not only by Shadilis, but by the world over, of Muslims and Sufis. And it has just the beauty of being able to be used. It's so very universal in application. Abu Madyan's is quite specific. And so his hikam here is by accounting oneself, by performing muhasabah, by accounting oneself, the status of awareness is achieved, or the status of awareness is reached. Awareness here is the translation for muraqaba. So in other words, by performing muhasabah, by entering a state of muhasabah, the state of muraqaba is achieved, right? And then there's a beautiful commentary, and I'm going to read it just entirely through, and then I'll make some points. The Shaykh al-Alawi, who was a major spiritual pole from 100 years ago of the Shadiliya Darqawiya order that he renewed, and it was named the Alawiya order, from where some of our teachers are part of the lineage from the Shadili school. He states on this very hikam, by accounting oneself, the status of awareness is reached. He says, to account oneself, muhasabah, is the first stage of the way, of the spiritual way. And by passing through it, the servant reaches the station of those who are near God. It means to not allow the soul, the Nafs, to wander free in the fields of sin. By accounting oneself, the soul is restrained and kept from total abandon. If the servant excels in this level and does so with consistency, in other words, they are consistent in a state of muhasabah, they are mindful, and they're in a state of present mindfulness for the majority of their day or their night, let's just say. If the servant excels in this level and does so with consistency, he will arrive to the level of awareness, to the station of Muraqaba. This is because accounting oneself for the believer implies that they are still falling into sin because they're accounting their sins, for their actions, because of their heedlessness of what? Of God's presence, of God's dhikr, of the dhikr Allah. But when the stage of awareness, muraqaba, is reached, here he means station, actually, and we're going to get to this point. When the station of muraqaba, of awareness of God's presence, is reached, which means to behold a real, capital R, from behind a veil without fully being immersed in his presence, which is the definition of muraqaba. Or to be aware that God knows the condition of his servants. This is an application of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in ta'budullaha ka'annaka tarahu fa in lam takun tara fa innahu yurak. That ihsan, spiritual mastery, spiritual beauty, spiritual excellence, virtue, ihsan is to worship Allah, to devote yourself to Allah as if you see him. And if you do not, then know, if you cannot see him, know verily he sees you. Right, so this is what he's alluding to. Let me read that sentence again. This is because accounting oneself implies that one still falls into sin through heedlessness, through ghafla. But when the station of awareness, muraqaba, is reached, which means to behold the real from behind a veil without fully being immersed in his presence, or to be aware that God knows the condition of his servants, and to be conscious of the fact that he sees all. The one who reaches this stage is always in a state of awe of God's presence. And therefore, to be in that state is to not fall into heedlessness. Because if you are now beyond mindfulness and you're in a place of heartfulness with God's presence, and this becomes your station or your conscious standing, effectively for the majority of your day, you will have less of a possibility of falling into sin because you are less and less in a state of heedlessness, because it is from heedlessness that sin arises. But if we are not even touching or sensitive to how we move out of a place of heart presence with Allah, and we are not heedless, then we will not fall into sin. And so therefore, the taking into account of our sins is less and less. What then occurs is a sensitivity to our presence. So our muhasabah is simply the muraqaba of God's presence. This is what is turned into. It's the subtlety that is encompassed by something more subtle but more encompassing, which is our heart presence. First we are mindful, and then we are heartful. The sinking of the aql, of the mindful observer into its source, as we did. And we felt, we experienced something more profound. Okay. And in that state of awe, if one cultivates this, practices this as a subtle practice, then one does not fall into the momentums of the tendencies of our sins, that we need to then be in the stage where we are taking to account. That this is the logic of this. And so the key word here I want to stress is stations. I'm going to get into that at the end. And so therefore has left the station of self-accounting of muhasabah. Do you understand that now? This is because self-accounting comes after sin, whereas awareness of God prevents one. That state of feeling God's awareness as a station prevents one from falling back into sin to begin with, because of one's awareness that God sees one always. If the servant remains predominantly in this state, in this station, it will open itself naturally. It will lead to the station of witnessing Mushahadah, what we also cycled into even for a moment, where we witnessed and were absorbed in God seeing of us, and we took the Shahada. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. When we witness the divine witness, we are absent as a separate witness. It's God who witnesses God's presence in us. This is the height of Mushahadah. It's okay if we didn't get there. And whosoever is conscious of Allah, He will make for them a way out. This then is his commentary on this very verse, a very famous verse, amazing application of this verse, right? Who knows this verse by heart? What? Because to say it out loud. Okay, like here, whoever has taqwa of Allah, Allah will make a way out for them. Kharaj, right? Will make a way out for them, right? So he applies this in an amazing way. So this verse, so can you say it now? وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Yes, makhraj, kharaj, right? To leave. So Allah makes a way out. We usually interpret this as in every day, that if you have taqwa, if you're in a bind in life, have taqwa of Allah, Allah will find a way out for you. And it's been proven. It's a very beautiful matter. Here, it's an amazing application. I mean, it shows the kutubiyya of this master. He says that when you are stationed in taqwa, then he will show you a way out of yourself to something that encompasses you more. So God will awaken you to a more subtle and encompassing center of your being. Amazing, amazing interpretation, right? These are the isharat of the Sufis, of the awliya, of the urafa, who take these verses that have a beautiful outer meaning and give it a subtle meaning for those who are traversing these states. So these are considered isharat, right? So like the one who verifies this is the one who is tasting it, right? So these are isharat. They do not negate the bahir meaning. of these things. And actually here, the Dhahir meaning, you can take this entirely as a Dhahir meaning, actually, of this verse. A really amazing matter. That is, whoever is conscious of God from behind a veil, fearing him, having taqwa, while not seeing him, he will make for them a way out of the prison of creation. So meaning the prison of your mind and of this world, where this imprisons the ruh, right? In our experience. So the spirit is imprisoned by the body mind, by the nafs, in this realm. We are bound because of our existence to the body mind. Right? But Allah makes a way out. This is really the deepest meaning of liberation, of spiritual liberation, where there is tajreed of the ruh, liberation of the spirit from the body mind. Right? He will make for them a way out of the prison of creation so that they see the Creator, because they have shown themselves to be ready for such a state. So first comes self-accounting, Muhasabah, then awareness, Muraqaba, then witnessing, Mushahadah. So the Muhasabah, Muraqaba, Mushahadah. The three modalities of the inner work that awaken these centers of the human soul, of human consciousness. And this is the sum of all religion, he says. Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. This is amazing. So he's taking these dimensions of the religion and making them spiritual stations. That if you are accounting yourself in your modality of taqwa, if you're on this state, which is a beautiful matter where you fear Allah, you have awe of Allah, and you recognize that you're falling into sin, and you're taking yourself to account, you are in a state of mujahadah, in the station of Islam. You're striving to submit to Allah. And when you lapse, you ask for forgiveness, tawbah. Right? It says you're stationed with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Islam as a spiritual station. Then there's Iman, where you're more aware of the realities of the ghaibi realities of Allah. This is what Iman is. Right? Iman is to have faith in what? The ghaib, the unseen. All the articles of faith are what? The 6 articles of faith, name them. Allah, the angels, the prophets, the scriptures or the revealed books, the day of judgment, the qadr of Allah. The 6 articles of faith. Guess what? They're all unseen realities. Even the qadr of Allah, until you see them. You do not see the whole unfolding of your fate. When something occurs, katab Allah, it was written. So you see it then, but you did not know it before. And we do not see when we will leave this realm. So all of this is unseen, right? The unseen ghaibi realities. So all of them, angels are unseen. Allah is unseen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate unseen seer of all. So with this existential participation in Iman, we are at Muraqaba, spiritual station of Muraqaba, where we feel the unseen presence of the real. It's very real for us behind a veil. There is us who is feeling Allah's presence. Right? So we're stationed at the latifa of the qalb, whereas first we were stationed at the latifa of the aqal, of the activated intellect, that was made to recognize God's signs outside of us and inside of us, and to reflect very deeply on the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quranic verses. Are you with me? Okay. And then the station of ihsan, which is mushahadah, the very literality of the prophetic definition in ta'budallaha ka'annaka tarahu. Ka'annaka tara, right? Worship Allah as if you see Him. Ka'annaka tara, as if you see Him. To be in this spiritual state of witnessing God's presence as you pray, as you reflect on God, as you as you interact with other people. Sayyidina Junaid, Qaddasallahu sirruhu wa radiyallahu an. He said that for 20 years people thought that I was speaking with them, but I was speaking with Allah. Amazing matter. That if you hit the code of that, that means since that moment he said that, he was in a state of baqa for 20 years. He was witnessing Allah's presence. In his interactions, he was witnessing the acts of God. So in his interactions, he was actually speaking with Allah. And you thought he was speaking with you. Your farq was not his jama in farq, and farq in jama, to use the technical words that we were using last night. You were in farq, and you were in separation from God's presence. And your vision was that of separative vision of every human being. That I see an object, I see this, maybe I remember God here and there, I forget, I'm into my things, etc. Oh, we're having a conversation, but for him, this conversation was always with Allah, although he was aware he was speaking with you as well. But you thought you were having a conversation with me, but I know that I was speaking with God alone in this whole time. That is a very high spiritual station, right? The beginning of which is the Mushahadah. This is the opening to the subtle consciousness of the sir, of our secret with Allah. In this opening is God's witnessing of himself through the locus of our spiritual heart. And in that, he gives us permission to bear witness to this mysteriously. To the reality of the verse, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَ مَا كُنْتُمْ. He is with you wherever you are, not in physicality, astaghfirullah, but in knowledge, in his attributes. He knows, he sees, he hears you, he is with you. In other words, he is with you by presence. This is the Mushahadah. This is the reality of Mushahadah. So he says, so first comes self-accounting, then awareness, then witnessing, Muhasabah, Muraqaba, Mushahadah, and this is the sum of all religion. Islam, Iman, Ihsan, law, faith, way. One of them was asked the meaning of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. He replied, Islam means to worship God, and Iman means to be aware of God and fear him, and Ihsan means to behold him and see him. The people of witnessing cannot commit sin as long as they are in the presence of their Lord. Right? So what prevents them from sinning is not their action, is their awareness of Allah. This is a big matter. Compare your istiqamah, your sense of istiqamah in an act of worship that you're proud of, to a wali Allah, an arif billah, a Gnostic, a direct knower of God, who is simply with God as their actions unfold. There's an immeasurable gulf of a distance between these two forms of istiqamah, because we know that the former istiqamah won't last. That we've been there, we've done that. Right. Very important. This is a beautiful poem. Then he quotes, and these are subtle secrets for istiqamah actually. When I intend an action and find you are watching, capital U, you are watching. When I intend an action and find you are watching me, I leave off what I intended. That is, I leave off myself and my own attribution to actions and rise to see you. To behold the real keeps the servant pure. Pure from what? Pure from the mixing of a sense of self, a sense of doership, a sense of doership in the action, in the ibadah. Subhanallah. So you have every right on your level to your doership. I mean, in fact, you're going to be asked about it on the day of judgment. But what of those individuals, those souls that say, I didn't do anything? Ibn Ajiba speaks of this in a text that on the day of judgment, they'll be handed their record and it'll be empty. Right? Some of us will have good deeds, inshallah, more than our bad deeds, bi'idhnillah. I mean, right? May Allah accept this, right? But these urafa, these knowers of God will have nothing in their book. And even God, as a kind of rhetoric, will smile and say, how come you have nothing? You came to your Lord, the Lord of the worlds, with no actions? He's testing them. Right? And they say that, Ya Allah, you are the doer. We bore witness to your essence, your attributes, and your acts that unfolded in our life. And he says, go straight to paradise, to the highest of paradises. There's no hisab here because there's no record. SubhanAllah. This is a beautiful story, but he presents it as a matter of fact. Of course, he received this from an insight, from ilham, from unveiling that there are some of these kind of individuals who have such an amazing station, right? That when I intend an action and find you are watching me, I leave off what I intended. For that was a fall, a subtle fall in my awareness of you. I began to produce again, or that which something was born in me again of my own doership. I lost sight of you. I began to have sight of me. This is the inner munajat of the heart. And so therefore I leave off what I intended and rise back up to see you and be immersed in you, in witnessing you. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. To behold the real keeps the servant pure. This is how. When you're out of the way, you're pure. Because only Allah Pak is pure.
Everything else is nudges.
Yes, that's a beautiful application spiritually. Right? So yourself, your nafs, in the deepest sense is nudges.
So you can't mix it with
pure. Yes. So if you apply a Fikr principle to a haqa'iq or to a haqiqa, right, to a particular haqq, right, to the subtlety, right. Were it not for awareness, there would be no penalty. This is a subtle saying of his, a little obscure. I'm going to leave it, right, because in this is the reason why there's because awareness is an intermediate stage, right? When you're in witnessing, so even awareness from the standpoint of witnessing is a veil, right? And we make Toba from even that station, although it's such a lofty station, right? When you went from sinking your intellect or your mindfulness into your heart as heartfulness, what happened? So you realized there was something that opened up, even more. Even if you touched it for a moment, something opened, right? So you were in something beautiful. It was peaceful at first, like the sensing and all this, but something else more subtle opened. When that opens, that you recognize the limitation of where you were. Of course, we're cycling, kind of in that, and I'll make this point. And so finally, and so the goal cannot be reached unless the beginning is sound, which means there must first be self-accounting, the muhasabah. As we said, period. One of the saints, God have mercy on him, would account himself for everything that he said. If he found a good word, he would give thanks to God. And if he found other than that, he would reproach himself and vow to God not to return to the like of it. Right? So he comes back to Muhasabah because that was the point of the hikam. But you see these amazing awliya, these aktab, these spiritual poles of the age, they give you everything, but they come back to like the point that, they give you everything and then they come back, right? And so here, I wanted you all to taste this first in some way and to reflect on what you experienced as I spoke of this matter, so that we were experiencing states more than just an intellectual. But inshallah, I gave you both an intellectual perspective, but from the standpoint of the feeling of a spiritual state. And so it's important for me to say this particular point. In this statement is the assumption, or the background of the statement is that the implication here is that you have the station of muhasabah, you have the station or standing of muraqaba, and then you have the station of mushahadah. One happens, then the other happens, and then the other happens, right? But in our guided meditation, if you were open, it's okay if you were not. For us to be open to these latifas, it takes spiritual work, it takes inner work, it takes purification of the nafs, and we're going to get into this. My only point is that if you did taste it, even for a moment, that was a hal, that was a transient state. And so it is possible to kind of cycle between muhasabah, muraqaba, even mushahadah. But we can put slightly the mushahadah out and just focus on the muraqaba or the muhasabah and the muraqaba. But I want to keep the mushahadah here because the title of this talk is the three kind of centers, right? So my point here is, especially as far as the spiritual work is concerned, in the spiritual way, in the spiritual path, and in particular in retreat, we're actually working with all of these centers or all of these practices. You're not just working for 1 year on muhasabah. You can, until it becomes a station. But how does it really become a station? In the real world of the way. It becomes a station because you're also somehow opening the more subtle center, or you're touching it sometimes. You're engaging in practices of muraqaba, so that you are more sensitive to having muhasabah, because you have the muhasabah of how you come out of muraqaba. And then you begin trying to figure yourself out. How did that happen? Why did that happen? I've been totally out for weeks, been in a down. Right? This is muhasabah now activating too, because you tasted muraqaba. You want it back. And so then you begin self-accounting, reflecting on yourself, knowledge of self. So you see how these centers are not just static and one after the other. They can be awakened to a certain extent, and even sufficiently, but let's just say to a certain extent, that allows you to see and appreciate how existentially they interrelate. And from this standpoint, when we're in a state of muhasabah, of self-accounting, self-observation, as I prefer, from a spiritual standpoint, self-observation is a good kind of very kind of neutral. Self-accounting is important from the point of view of iman. How much are we following the sacred law? All that's important from the point of view of iman. But in regards to a transformation that stays, when it's simply observing ourselves and seeing what's occurring, it has more of an effect, especially in this day and age. Because when we judge ourselves more, especially in this age, there's a negativity and weight that weighs us down. Older souls from hundreds of years ago, I'm self-accounting, strengthened their iman. Right? It still can, but I have noticed in myself and in others, it's not the entire way for many souls now. So understanding that the muhasabah in a deeply contemplative sense is self-observation, allows the possibility of this to open onto something more profound, because you're letting go of personal judgment, of the nafs actually co-opting your observation, your accounting, right? Because what happens is you may get stuck in the lawami nafs. Oh, woe is me, right? As that, kind of, oh, woe is me, right? And then that just weighs you down. Thank you for the laugh. Thank you. Right? The lawami is the lamenting nafs. Oh, woe is me. Right. And this just weighs you down and down. The point of feeling down or bad or having a fear of Allah is a function to awaken you to something more profound, more subtle, more deep, more encompassing. Right? So these can all work in tandem. So when we're performing the work of muhasaba in our lives, when we observe our actions for the day at the end of the day, or when we intend certain actions for the day at the beginning, and we get used to this, we may begin observing that which comes prior to actions, which would be thoughts and feelings. For, after there is a sufficient a degree of observation of our actions, and there's some level of transformation in regards to how we relate by simply observing our actions, we can then go a little bit more subtle, right, to our thoughts, feelings. Right? We're coming in. If you recall the Hizb al-Bahr, right? نسألك الإسمة في الحركات, actions, sakanat, arrests, kalimat, words, speech, iradat, desires, khatarat, thoughts. You see what's happening here? Imam Abdul Hamid Shadili is asking Allah to grant infallible protection, isma, or let's just say protection, the divine protection in our actions. That's the most extrinsic aspect of our being, our actions. Those are very important, but it's the most outward aspect. Become a little bit more subtle, more inwards. Then what? Speech, which is an action, but you can see that speech is more connected to consciousness in a particular way, your thoughts and all that. Speech is more immediate there, and it's also an action. So it's both. It's like a barzakh. We've come in a bit more subtly. Then what? Desires. When we desire or when we have a determination, then we speak. Well, when we're motivated to say something, then we say it, or then we do it, right, as an action. Desires, or we have a desire for something haram, a tendency that way. Imagine if you were granted the divine protection on that level, where then God checked that and prevented it from embodying itself or coming out. Then from there, thoughts, because what leads to the motivation or the desires, it's a thought first that arises, that then the heart attaches itself to and then moves forward, right, in that. See, so you see the subtlety. And imagine if you were protected on each of these levels, you will come back to what? Yourself and God, right? And this is what the prayer teaches, right? That veils those verities of the unseen. Like if you continue reading that prayer, it's really an amazing to miraculous prayer. Like that prayer, that line right there has everything, actually. If Allah accepts that prayer, you're a saint. Actually, that's how sanctity works, right? They're such in the presence of God. They're witnessing God, coming back to the Sheikh al-Alawi's commentary, that they don't move from witnessing God. They don't move away from witnessing God because they found God to be everywhere. فَأَيْنَ تَوَلَّوْا فَثُمَّ وَجْهُ لِلَّهِ. Wajhullah, right? That wheresoever you look, there is the face or the presence of God. This is witnessing. This is Mushahadah. Right? It's a lofty station, but you see, even in that statement of God, there is the sense of when you are there, it's all encompassing. All encompassing. Wherever you look, wherever you turn, God is everywhere because He is nowhere. And in His nowhereness, He is everywhere. And that everywhereness is awareness. Right? Subhanallah. Right? To be nowhere yet everywhere is to be aware of God's presence. Right? So if you make a meme out of that, let's make sure my name's on that, all right? And then I fall from the mushahadah that I was in, right? Alhamdulillah. So I wanted to make this point, and we're about to hit the hour mark of when we started, but I wanted to make this point, so we'll have a part 2 of this because I want the part 2 to be take-home exercises. So I want to unfold that for you all, that these centers that are being awakened, first by Muhasaba, which would be aligned to intellect, conscious intellect, right? We're awakening the intellect within Nafs so that it can restrain the Nafs, What is one of the meanings of aql? What is the meaning of aqilu? To bind, tie, or restrain. What are you restraining? Nafs. SubhanAllah. In a more subtle sense, the intellect grasps onto, holds onto thoughts or objects or ideas. But in its functional sense, the point of the aql is to aqilu, the nafs. That's amazing. So when the intellect, when our mindfulness is actually awakened, when the intellect is awakened, it functions to restrain the nafs and bring it back into the bounds of the sacred law, of the will and the commands of God, right? So that it does not wander free in its desires, which if you allow it, its appetite will get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the whole purpose of fasting is to constrict its appetite. Right? As you constrict it, you are observing the constriction from some other more subtle place that's more encompassing of your consciousness. But if you reduce yourself to just simply your desires, you are identifying your consciousness with solely the body and its desires that have accumulated from the conditioning of likes and dislikes, or our pleasures and our aversions, if we want to use more technical language, right? This is restrained by intellect as it is awakened as a subtlety. The intellect is related to, it's a refraction of the sun of spirit upon the heart. And this ray of light that is a continuity of ruh is intellect that shines to objectify what we are doing. Right? So it's this function. This is what intellect does, mindfulness. So this awakening by muhasabah is the aql, the latifa of the aql that then restrains the latifa of nafs. Right? This is the work of muhasabah, where we then, and the ways to do this is to self-reflect on our actions, as we were discussing, to reflect on intellectually the signs of Allah, to read Quran, reflect on its meanings, read commentaries, and to most importantly hone in on ourselves. This is a beautiful practice in the silence, in the spacious silenceness that one experiences in the retreat, in this spiritual retreat. It's a beautiful time for muhasabah because you're in a place of stillness. You've especially after day 1 to 2, you're more existentially as you're fasting, and in silence, the mind is still. It's still enough as you enter the silence to reflect. A famous saying in Sufism is that silence is the fertile soil of the intellect. So the experience of silence fertilizes the intellect, awakens the intellect, so that it can be used for the reason it was made by God in the human soul. So we're awakening this kind of center of human consciousness in the soul, center of consciousness in the soul. So muhasabah is very, very important. It helps us deal with the mujahadah of the nafs, which is an important element of the spiritual path. Then we have the muraqaba, which is the awakening of the latifa, the subtle conscious center and energetic center of the heart, the qalb. This is where practices like muraqaba and dhikr and Quran recitation is very, very important, where we're integrating the tongue, the body, the mind, if you will, the sound, right? The sonorous divine sounds of the divine speech that enters and heals. You're integrating all of this, penetrates your being according to certain verses of the Quran that hint at this. Those who, when they listen to the Quran, they shake with khashya, or that the heart is humbled by the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So there's verses like this. Is it not time for the hearts to become humbled by the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This dhikr of Allah in this verse is both Quran and the dhikr of Allah, the constant mentioning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To have khashya, it awakens khashya in the heart, and also love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the muraqaba practices in terms of meditation and the dhikr of Allah and other ibadat work on the level of the heart. And so this is an awakening of this spiritual faculty. Then we have the spirit, or the Mushahadah, or the sir, because all of this is spiritual work. We can then say that when Mushahadah is awakened, it's the awakening of the center of the inmost self, or the inner secret with God, the inner subtle secret with God in our consciousness, called the sir, that Allah names the sir in the Quran, which is connected to the inner heart, the fu'ad, and beyond it. Allow me to stop here, inshallah, and we'll do a part two for tomorrow night, where we bring together this. And but I already hinted at some of the exercises that can be done, but it's important for us. And so, if I have anything more to say about this, then I will add it. But so you can see how this also relates to Toba. So your Muhasabah. And so let me end with this. As we perform the Muhasabah, we will come to a point in our retreat or in the spiritual way, in the spiritual life, where we recognize a pattern and we are aware that we need to return unto God from a particular action or a tendency. This is where Toba is important. And you see that the Aql was very important in this, the awakening of the Aql. To answer something that someone had asked that I might start with next time, for certain actions, it is important to have a fear of Allah. For certain actions that we are bound by, that are, for example, major sins, we should have a sense of fear, because the Nafs does, the Nafsani consciousness does respond to fear, but the fear of God, the fear of punishment. Sometimes we have to reflect on this in the intellect and to remind our Nafs of the consequences of our actions, very much like our actions are curbed if we're aware that we are breaking the law and we could be imprisoned. That immediately confers a fear that acts as a function to restrain us from that act, to let it go. In the same way, we should have the same sense of reality and realness to the consequences in the akhirah. So this element of the fear of Allah, the makhafatullah, is very important. And as an element, as an emotional element, but as a function to get us to a place where we detach from those actions, and then we begin feeling the sweetness of Iman in more proper actions, which then evokes the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the purpose is to get to the love. So I wanted to mention this. So there is a place for the fear of God. But if you only relate to God and your worship of God by fear, it's, you could say, energetically speaking, it's a low vibration. And you will be sustaining enough that praise, but you won't be awakening an intellect. And beyond that, a spiritual heart. And beyond that, your innermost sir, your secret with God, by simply fear, by the emotion fear. Taqwa does not equal fear. Fear of Allah is a part of taqwa, just as knowledge of Allah is part of taqwa, just as love of Allah is the height of taqwa. If it was fear of Allah, Allah would have said makhafatullah in Arabic. He did not. Taqwa has a sense of conscientiousness, to be aware, right? Yes, it has this connotation, but there's degrees of taqwa, right? So, and I just gave you another rule of threes on that. We have fear, knowledge, love in terms of the grades or the levels of taqwa. But so muhasabah, the aql, and taqwa, I want to explicitly make the connection there in terms of how to awaken the aql with muhasabah and tawbah. That's what I meant. So muhasabah, or aql, muhasabah, tawbah, right? For the muraqaba, we have the muraqaba, or we have qalb, muraqaba, or the practice of muraqaba leads to the awakening of the qalb, which leads to the knowledge of Allah and His reality. Then we have the ruh, or the sir, which is a witnessing of God, which leads to a kind of love and the attraction of God's presence, our attraction to and God's attraction to us, which is a kind of love, right? The seat of the heart is knowledge, but the seat of the ruh, the spirit, and the sir is witnessing and love, right? And finally, allow me to end by saying that for for one to work with all these elements, these centers of the human soul in a harmonious way, in a more fixed way, what is needed is a spiritual companion and a guide or a teacher who has this element of awakened presence. This is essential. If you do not have that in your companionship, in your suluk, or in your way with attempting to purify, you may only awaken intellect and come to heart because of your sincerity and your iman, but you may not go beyond that. So it's important for me to mention that, especially from the standpoint of Islamic spirituality, from the standpoint of tasawwuf. Yes.
So it's essential element for the sheikh to give his tawajjuh on the
Yes. It's essential for the sheikh, for one to be present with them spiritually and or physically as well, to receive the guidance. Some of the murids who are far away, because of their sincerity, spiritual tawajjuh is enough, which means connection, talqeen by bay'ah, by the reception of awrad that come through the teacher and their silsila, and the prayers of the teacher, of the sheikh. That tawajjuh is the most important, spiritual. So one can be far away as a murid, but still entirely benefit, because space and time do not separate the spirit, the latifa of spirit. We just experience this. Your spirit encompassed this physical space, actually. When you were awakened to realizing that, it always does. So what about then the arwah and the spirits? They are all connected. So when there is a conscious connection and opening, a murid physically can be far, but can be spiritually very near the sheikh and be very advanced, even more than some of the murids who are nearby. And I've witnessed this. Wallahi al-Azim, I bore witness to this. I bear witness to this with my own sheikhs and the murids. And even in my own experience, as a teacher, I have seen this. I have some students who are quite advanced, who I've never even seen their face. Wallahi. I have never seen their face, but over the last 5 years, we've been in conversation, and they've sent me letters. And I know from the letters where they are, and I instruct them. I've never seen their face. And this is primarily due to some of them being deeply pious, and certain kinds of women who have not shown me their face, for example. That doesn't mean that's what I want. No, it would be nice to see you, right? That adds another element where there's a connection spiritually where I can help as well. But in this particular case, I'm just giving an example. I'm not giving a name. I don't want to give this person away, or even if they're listening, that they have a high station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's others who I've not met physically, but I've seen them on Zoom or something, or converse over the phone, and they have lofty stations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And then I have you guys, subhanAllah, and well, at least my station's rising due to my patience, which now, of course, is down because I admitted that, right? I'm joking. May Allah preserve you all, and may Allah increase us all. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا والحمد لله رب العالمين. نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.